Let's get this meeting going. Okay, roll call.
Melton present.
Cook present.
Eglash present.
Hall present.
Excellent, just enough to get going. Are there any members of the public who would like to address anything that's not on the agenda? No? Minutes?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Okay, any corrections or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. 4-0. Okay, agenda review and revisions. There are no revisions that I know of. Nope. So no changes there. Reports from commissioner meetings or events. None. Director of Utilities report. Ready or not, here we come.
Thank you very much, Chair Cook. Hello to everyone. I have a few things to report. Always first on people's minds is the water supply situation, where we are today. So the water supply situation as of March 1st is still, this is March 1st, so before this current storm, is still not good. February was wetter than average, and that brought the water year to date totals for precipitation in the Hetch Hetchy watershed up to 40% of the average for the water year to date. 48%, what did I say? 40? I can't even read. So 48% of the average for the water year to date, which is October 1st of 2013 to March 1st of 2014. This is the date for this report, March 1st. The total water and storage for the Hetch Hetchy regional system was a little over 1 million acre feet as of March 1, which is about 70% of the maximum storage capacity. San Francisco is expected to provide an update on the water supply situation on April 1 and may update its request for voluntary 10% water use reductions by April 15. The city's February water consumption was 9% below the forecast and 10% below the February 2013 year-ago usage, likely due to the rainy weather as well as conservation efforts. Starting next month for the duration of the water supply shortage, I will add a standing item to the UAC agendas to provide water supply and water usage updates and an opportunity for you all to be able to discuss the issue.
That's a great idea.
That was a suggestion from Commissioner Eglash, and we agreed with it. Hydroelectric generation update. Recent storms that the state received in February and early March have improved the outlook for the city's hydroelectric generation updates for the rest of the year, although overall the situation remains fairly bleak. As of March 21, cumulative precipitation totals for the water year in northern and central California were approximately 50% and 40% of average. So 50% is northern, 40% for central. And reservoir levels in this region were approximately 60% of average for this time of year. Even if we receive an average level of precipitation going forward, our western-based resource supply is expected to be 16% below long-term average levels this fiscal year and 21% below average in fiscal year 2015. Calaveras supplies are projected to be 58% below long-term average levels for this fiscal year and 28% below average for fiscal year 2015. The cost of making up for the shortfall in energy supplies with market power purchases is estimated to be about $6 million per year in each of these two fiscal years. And then I have a number of communications update. We just learned that our application for grant funding from the Santa Clara Valley Water District was approved, and so we're going to get $100,000. And with that, we're proposing two new programs. One is a business water report, similar to the ones that we sent out to residential customers, but this one will be for businesses. And the other is an expansion of our commercial customer pilot program using real-time water use monitoring. Commissioner Hall has been really great at giving us feedback and working with us on that one. Silicon Valley Water Conservation Award. We were honored earlier this week as a recipient of the Silicon Valley Water Conservation Award for having one of the most comprehensive water conservation programs in the state. So while during the drought there has been heightened awareness of our water efficiency programs, it is noteworthy that this award is for our decades-long outreach efforts. In the last 10 years alone, our programs have saved over 300,000 gallons of water, which is the equivalent of 12 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And then we have coming up between now and then through April quite a few outreach events. And I'm just going to kind of run through this quickly, and if you are interested in a specific one, let us know. We can send you even more information. On March 8th, there's an Arbor Day event where we'll be promoting our landscape efficiency programs. On March 18th, Midtown Residents Association, where we'll be presenting information on the drought situation, our water supply status, and our programs. On March 18th, wait, where are we now? This is all past, sorry.
Did I type will be? It should have been, we did.
She might have said that, actually. So on March 24th, we had the, wait, what's today's date? Yeah, so that would have been this week, the Silicon Valley Landscape Water Conservation Summit, and that's where our staff was instrumental in the COLA. So we had Catherine Elver, who was actually personally involved in this event, and this is also where we received our award. So upcoming, thank you, Debbie, is the April 5th irrigation workshop, where we will share techniques for saving water while keeping plants healthy. On April 19th, this is a Saturday, we have the Great Race to Save Water. It's our second annual. Last year was quite a hit. This is a joint venture spearheaded by our water conservation staff. It involves many other departments and a whole lot of agencies like the Santa Clara Valley Water District, BOSCA, local nonprofits such as the Tuolumne River Trust and Actera and the Sierra Club, to name a few. And as I recall last year, we had our own retiree Tom Cabot do a bicycle station where he helped tune up bicycles. Then on the 24th, there's the Greenlight Film Festival and Eco Fashion Show. This year's event, which the City of Palo Alto Utilities co-sponsors, along with other regional cities and agencies, promises to be bigger and more elaborate than ever. And then in April, we're going to have a number of Earth Day connected activities going on through the month. And you'll also see a number of special bill inserts, and we will be present at a number of school and business events. And that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, we have...
Yeah, I just have a question I'd like to just follow up. In the quarterly report, it commented, there was a comment that the project to hook up the 18 PAUSD sites was due to be completed just about right now. I forget the exact date, but it was very close to now, today. Has that been successfully completed?
Actually, I think the correct answer is yes. I just can't remember if, I think the Palo Alto Unified School District is in testing mode, so we haven't turned everything over yet. Neither have they turned off their Comcast service because they want to make sure everything works, but everything is installed.
So we think, basically, until they finish testing, we have, as far as we're concerned, we have a successfully completed project with the school district.
Yes, even after they finish testing, we think that will be the case.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I don't believe we have any unfinished business, so let's go to new business, item number 1.
So I'll introduce Senior Resource Planner Jim Stack here to give you the good news about another power purchase agreement that we are bringing forward. We are recommending that the city execute.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Director Fong. Good evening, Commissioners. So in November, I was here to discuss the initial results from our fall 2013 RFP. Tonight, I'm back with the culmination of that effort. I'm going to be presenting the contract that we have selected. And we recently finished negotiating for the one project that we selected out of the 92 proposals that we received from the RFP. So in my presentation tonight, I'll take you through the process that we went through with the RFP that led us to select this particular project. I'll give you an overview of the project itself and the PPA terms. I'll talk about some of the risks involved in these kinds of transactions and what we're trying to do to mitigate them. Then I'll speak to how this particular project will fit into the overall portfolio when it comes online next year. And then finally, I'll present our overall recommendation. So when we issued the RFP in the fall, this graph shows how we saw our electric needs and supply in the year 2017, which is when we expect all of our currently committed resources to be online. So the big takeaway here is that we were projecting that 99% of our total needs of about 1,000 gigawatt hours per year would be supplied by our hydro and renewables contracts in 2017, assuming average hydro conditions, of course. But if you just drill down a little bit, you can see that aside from that the hydro expectation, which is extremely variable, roughly a quarter of the projected carbon neutral supply is coming from the 4 solar contracts that we've executed in the past year or so. 3 of those contracts have online dates of the end of 2016, and all of them are, I think it's fair to say, a little bit uncertain in terms of their timing and viability at this point. So we issued this RFP to provide some insurance against the risk of dry hydro and against the risk that some of these projects might not come to fruition. Also, it's worth noting that we have a lot of space in our portfolio prior to 2016 and then after 2020. So we do have a need for more renewable energy for those periods of time. And also, we wanted to take advantage of the fact that renewable energy prices are still very attractive right now. So this is a slide that I presented in November summarizing the results of the RFP. We received 92 proposals, which altogether would produce about 6 times as much energy as the city needs in a year. The number of responses we received was exactly the same as we received in the RFP from a year prior. And the breakdown by resource type was also pretty similar, with the results dominated by solar PV projects. And as with past RFPs, when we evaluated the proposals, the most important criteria we looked at were price and viability. And for the price score, we used the green premium concept, where we compare the renewable energy project price to the price of brown energy with similar characteristics in order to get everything on an apples-to-apples basis for comparison. One thing we did differently this year compared to prior years is we actually gave some bonus points, not very much, but a little bit of sort of bonus points to projects that come online prior to 2016. So earlier start dates were given priority in this RFP. And we did that to account for the fact that last year we signed contracts for 3 large projects with online dates at the end of 2016. And we wanted to have a little more certainty earlier on for projects out of this RFP. And it's also to acknowledge the fact that we have an internal RPS target of 33% by 2015, and we'd prefer to get some projects out of this RFP that could help us meet that goal. So another slide that I presented in November. This is a graph showing the green premiums of all 92 proposals we received, as well as their proposed start dates and the type of resource that they are. One difference is that I've circled in this graph the project that I'm going to be presenting to you tonight, which is in the kind of the bottom center portion of that graph. As you can see, this project was among the lowest priced proposals we received, but it wasn't the absolute lowest price. And the reason that we selected this project out of all the proposals we received, rather than the very lowest priced ones, which are at the start dates at the end of December 2016, has to do partly with the fact that we gave some bonus points to projects come online in 2014 or 15, as I just mentioned. But also, this project had a higher viability score. It scored better on the viability criterion than the other projects did with 2016 start dates. So with that, here's a little high-level summary of the proposed project and the PPA terms. The project will be named the Hayworth Solar Farm, although the legal entity that we're going to be contracting with is called 65HK8ME LLC. Truly rolls off the tongue. The price we've agreed to, it's a little bit nuanced, but it's effectively $68.72 per megawatt hour, non-escalating price over the length of the contract. Which is really a fantastic price, especially considering that this project, in addition to providing us with energy, It'll also provide us with local capacity that we can use towards our local capacity requirements. So that's a valuable product that we'll get at no additional cost. The price is also slightly lower than the prices of the 3 contracts that we approved last year. So it'll be a 25 megawatt project. It'll be providing approximately 6% of the city's total load. The contract term is set to begin in June 2015 and will go for 27 years, followed by one 3-year extension term option that can be exercised by either party, us or the developer. And then after that extension term, there will be another 4-year extension term option that only the city can exercise. The project will be located in Kern County, just east of Bakersfield, on about 200 acres of previously disturbed farmland. And it's worth noting it's actually going to be part of a larger 90 megawatt set of projects that the developer team of 8 Minute Energy and SafeRay is going to be developing all together. And currently they already have 2 PPAs executed for other portions of that project site with PG&E in Southern California Edison. So I think that'll enhance the viability of the overall project and make it more likely to be built. And next I wanted to just go over some of the risks involved in signing contracts like this. It's a 30-plus year contract at a fixed price for a resource that doesn't exist yet. So obviously there are some risks involved. The first risk is counterparty risk, which is the risk that the company goes out of business or goes bankrupt. And to mitigate that risk, we have the fact that this is a PPA structure. We're not putting any money down up front. We only pay for energy after it's delivered to us. The next risk is development risk, which is the risk that the project experiences some challenges and doesn't get built. And to address that, in the contract, we're requiring the developer puts down a development deposit after signing of almost $1.9 million. And Palo Alto will get to hold on to that money if the project doesn't come through, essentially. And then similarly, once the project is built and starts operating, if it starts to break down and doesn't get repaired, we'll have a performance assurance deposit of about $2.5 million that will be given to us, and we'll be able to hold on to that in the event that they can't pay the damages for failure to perform. And I wanted to note that these two the development and performance assurance amounts are significantly higher than they've been for any of our previous contracts. So we took a little bit more of a conservative approach to protect the city interests. And then the last risk, of course, is that we'll have some buyer's remorse down the road at some point, and there's not much you can do about that. So next I have a few slides on how the project will fit into our overall supply portfolio. The first one is a graph showing the long-term view of our renewable supply. And the proposed project, the Hayworth project, is shown in the lightly shaded bars at the top. I'm also showing two lines here. The lower line shows the amount of renewable energy needed to achieve our RPS target, and the upper line shows the amount of renewable energy we need to get to carbon neutrality. And I guess the thing to highlight about this graph, the thing that stands out, is that with the Hayworth project in our portfolio, the city could have more renewable energy supply than we actually need to achieve carbon neutrality for 4 years, starting in 2017. And then after those 4 years, in 2021, some of our older contracts start to expire, and we'll have, again, some need to add some energy to the portfolio to maintain carbon neutrality. I should note, though, that that scenario that I just outlined for those 4 years of us having surplus electricity, that's kind of an optimistic scenario, a best case, and that situation will only exist if we have kind of a normal hydro year, average conditions or better, and if all 4 of our solar projects that are in development, plus this new one, actually get built according to the schedule that we're expecting. And then, in that case, if that happy scenario does arise, we would be in the position of being able to sell pretty easily the surplus electricity we have, either on the spot market or the forward market. And we would have the choice of whether to sell the RECs along with that energy, or to hang on to them and bank them for future years when we might have a dry year. And it's worth noting that right now, the price of energy plus REC, the bundled product, is pretty high, so that would be a good thing for us if we were selling. Not that that's the reason that we're going to be doing this contract. And again, this situation would only exist for 4 years out of the up to 34-year term of the contract that we're proposing here. My next slide addresses the issue of hydro variability a little bit more. This one shows the electric supply and load with Hayworth Solar included in the portfolio in 2017 under dry, average, and wet conditions. And you can see that in an average year, assuming all of our solar projects get built, the city would have a slight surplus position for the year as a whole. As is already the case right now, in some months we would have a surplus position, in some months we would be deficit, but netted over the course of the year would be surplus overall. However, in a dry year, and we've been seeing a lot of dry years lately, unfortunately, we would still have a pretty large deficit position that we would have to make up for with market energy and market and REC purchases to fill that gap. And then in a wet year, we would just have a significant surplus we would have to sell. And all of this is exactly how we manage the portfolio presently. In some months we have surpluses, in some months we have deficits. And even today, without the solar projects operating, we still have the potential to have a surplus overall for the year if it's a very wet year. So adding the Hayworth project to our portfolio won't really change anything in the way we manage the portfolio right now. It'll just mean slightly more sales and fewer purchases overall going forward. Next, I have a table summarizing all of our renewable energy purchases to date and the green premiums of those. You can see that for our operating resources, which are producing about 21% of our load right now, they have pretty low prices, so they have a total negative green premium of $300,000. And the 5 projects that we have that are committed to but are not, they're still in development, are a bit more expensive overall, and they'll bring the total green premium once they come online up to about $1.6 million. And they'll get us to an RPS level of 49% once they're operating. Adding Hayworth Solar and those 60 gigawatt hours per year to the portfolio would increase the RPS level to about over 55%. And Hayworth's green premium is estimated at about $330,000 right now. So that would bring the total green premium to about $1.9 million, which is equivalent to about 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour as a retail rate impact, which is still far below the city's limit of 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And then to close, I wanted to just make the case or reiterate that now is a great time to be buying renewable energy. First, because of our aggressive carbon neutrality and RPS goals, we're a natural buyer in this market, both for the 2015 and 2016 period, and then post-2020, we still have big holes to fill, and we have a real need for the energy this project would provide. Secondly, it's still overall a real buyer's market out there. A lot of the big utilities are not actively buying at the moment, and there are still a lot of good, highly viable projects out there, so prices are very attractive. And then lastly, the federal 30% investment tax credit is set to drop from 30% to 10% after 2016. And there's really not much of an expectation at this point that that'll get extended at the 30% level beyond that. So I think we would be wise to do as much contracting as we can now for projects that'll come online by the end of 2016 and can take advantage of that subsidy while it exists. So with that, the staff recommendation is here. Staff's recommending that the UAC recommend the council approve the PPA with Hayworth Solar and delegate authority to the city manager to execute the PPA and the 2 contract extensions. We're also recommending that the council waive the investment grade credit rating requirement of the municipal code, as we've done with all of our renewable energy PPAs to date. And lastly, we're recommending a waiver of the anti-speculation requirements of the energy risk management policy. And on that point, I wanted to note that the definition of speculation that we use in that policy is fairly broad and fairly unique to Palo Alto. We say buying energy not needed for meeting forecasted load or selling energy that is not owned. I think most utilities have a slightly narrower definition, and they recognize that there's some uncertainty around projections 4 or 5 years in the future, and they shouldn't be held to those lines precisely. And then our next steps in the process are to take this contract to the Finance Committee in early May and then to the Council in early June. And of course, we're going to be continuing to monitor all of our projects that are in development as they go forward. And lastly, touching back on the point I made about how this is a great time to buy renewable energy, I think the next phase in our procurement efforts might be that we issue an RFP some point soon for projects that would be coming online by the end of 2016, and so could take advantage of the 30% investment tax credit, but where they wouldn't start delivering energy to us and we wouldn't start paying for the energy until 2021 or 2022. So with that, that's all I have, so thank you for your time.
Great, thanks very much. Questions from the commissioners?
Thank you. Seems like a very good project. I just had a couple of questions. One was just something I maybe noticed just in passing is on your slide 6, if you can click to it, you had a circle around the green premium at it's about 0.9 cents a kilowatt hour. But in the materials that we issued today, I actually looked at that. It seemed more like about half a cent. Does that mean that you negotiated a lower price compared to the slide that you just showed us? I'm looking at page 7 in the materials that was sent out.
I think the difference is that since the time I wrote this report, I updated the prices here, and this is based on current market prices and where the project price is relative to where the current market is. So I think the current market prices have come down a bit since the time that I wrote the report. So that's the reason for the slight difference, I think, in the presentation versus the report.
Okay, so 0.9 cents is the correct premium too?
That's based on our current
best estimate for now.
Yeah. We'll refresh that once we execute the contract and kind of lock that in for long term.
Okay. So the other thing I'm just wondering about, because it sounds like the Kern area where this project will be located is within an area that the Cal ISO deems to be capacity deficient, I believe it is, or has a capacity need. And that's fortunate for the City of Palo Alto because it allows us to deem a capacity credit for the project. I was just wondering about the mechanism with which Cal ISO informs the city if that should change. For example, we're now going to presumably count something up to 25 megawatts as a capacity credit for ourselves. How do we know that that's the case? How do we know that Cal ISO would validate that for the city? And then the second part is what I said a moment ago. If that had to change, how would we be notified?
I believe the answer is that every year the ISO does a new study. They do a very big technical study. It's 100-plus pages where they kind of model the entire grid, and they actually determine the specific regions where they need additional capacity, where there is the capacity constraint. And they model this fairly precisely. They get down to the substation level. So they'll kind of define which substations count towards the local capacity credits. So if the project, our project connects to a certain substation, and it's 1 year, it'll be currently it's defined as being in the current load constrained area. But when they refresh the study in a year or two, it's possible that they could change the boundary, and that substation could be out, and the next substation, closer to Bakersfield is in. So to be aware of that, we simply have to check the Cal ISO studies, the independent system operator studies every year,
right,
and make sure that our resources are still qualifying for local capacity. And we do that anyway, of course, every year to make sure that our resources our accounting is for local capacity, and because we have to every year go out and purchase more local capacity because we always have a deficit position on local capacity.
Yeah.
So if this resource, in 10 years is no longer counting as local capacity, we would just have to go out and purchase a little bit more the following year to meet our obligation.
So just as a reminder, the process is that, when the ISO runs its study, we actually kind of get assigned an obligation amount, an amount we're obligated to purchase in terms of local capacity. And so what Jim will do is or Monica, or whoever the front office might be, or whoever does this, sorry, I don't even know, but they'll calculate how much capacity we have in our portfolio, what we're short, and then they go on the market and buy the difference. So it's an annual calculation anyway for us. I mean,
Okay.
so we don't need to be, we're notified to the extent the ISO does a study, then we're paying attention, and we know that our obligation, it changes every year. It's a little bit different every year.
All right. Okay. And the third question I had, if I just can finish up, is I noticed the performance bond is triggered by a situation where there's in fact a non-performance. In fact, I didn't read it in detail, but it sounded like more than 1 year of non-performance, at which case they need to post a bond of upwards of $2 million, I believe, with the city. I was just wondering if that's different from any of the other PPAs. Where, for example, any of the ones that we currently have signed, did they upfront post a performance bond where they would do that with or without a performance issue arising, or is this unique?
This is fairly standard. When the project starts operating, they'll actually post a performance bond at that point, even without any performance issues.
All right.
So we simply hold on to that as a security in the event that it stops, it has performance problems. And then we can start drawing down from that according to the formula of the contract.
Then I had misunderstood. Okay, that's a much more happy answer. Thank you.
Yes, and that situation exists in, I think, all of our other solar contracts.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. I have 3 questions. One is, I think you've told us this before, probably more than once, but how long can we bank the RECs if we get more than we need? I feel like I've seen it, but I can't remember if it's
That's a
a
good
couple
question.
of years, but I can't remember.
It might be up to 3 years, I
Yeah.
think.
John Abendschein, Senior Resource Planner. The reporting to the California Energy Commission is still fairly new, but the banking looks to be pretty much unlimited through the end of the RPS period.
So that's for banking for RPS purposes. For our own carbon neutrality purposes, I think we could.
I'm not as worried about that. Have we collected any letters of credit with any of the solar projects that haven't hit their milestones?
Yes, we have. All 4 of them have posted either letters of credit or cash.
Or have we had to call any of them because they haven't hit their milestones?
We haven't drawn down on the letters of credit yet. We haven't had any situation where they are delinquent in their milestones.
All right,
Are you only interested in solar?
Yeah, no, I was just interested in the contracts we'd signed that hadn't been built yet.
Performance bonds for people who backed out.
Yeah. Or they didn't, or they put up their, develop their letter of credit and the development risk, and then they didn't.
Okay, so I was doing it offline, I'm sorry, but we did have one specific power purchase agreement with a solar developer that was amended because they needed to change certain, like their site and whatnot. And in order to do that, we extracted certain benefits back, and we actually took that to council and got the contract amendment approved. But Jim can give you just, like a 30-second overview of what that was.
Well, that was a landfill project where that was, they hadn't posted a development assurance for that project. We hadn't been requiring it up to that point. But they needed an extension on their COD deadline. So we sort of asked for effectively what's equivalent to, kind of an LD, liquidated damages for that extension that we gave them. And that was in the range of $120,000, I think, that we collected from that.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions? I don't have any more. Okay, great. So do we have a motion on the recommendation?
I move the recommendation as requested by staff.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All of us voted for it. Okay, thanks very much for the presentation.
Thanks.
Yeah, keep getting those low prices. That's good. Okay, let's go on to item number 2, please.
Our next item will be presented by Nico Prokos, Senior Resource Planner, and has to do with net energy metering aggregation.
Oh, yeah, I guess we have to do that, huh? Let me escape. Is it up top there? Is that it right there? That looks familiar. Yeah. Good evening, Commissioners. I'll be talking tonight about the net energy metering aggregation report before you, and we have a brief presentation just to hit the high points and before we have any discussion. By way of agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the net energy metering background. Then we're going to go into an aggregation introduction. We're going to talk a little bit about aggregation limitations. We did have a chance to talk to some other publicly owned utilities and in the IOU world to see what they're doing. Then we're going to bring forward the recommendation, and then following that, we're going to just show the next steps for this item. Now, in terms of background for net energy metering, net energy metering allows customers to carry forward bill credits essentially for excess generation. It's currently there's a 5% cap of coincident peak demand for publicly owned utilities. It's essentially the same for the IOUs. There's some slight differences, but more or less the same. That has changed over time, but at this point it's about 5%. It is 5%. Until 2009, the law specified that excess generation would revert to the utility. So at the end of the 12-month period, there would be no payout or anything of that nature. That simply just went to us. After 2009, customers with surplus generation that exceeds their usage have essentially 2 options. Their first option is they can cash out at a specific rate that's in our rules and regulations and our rate schedules. Their second option is to carry forward their credit, and in theory they could do that indefinitely. I have a sample chart that is actually in one of our handouts that kind of illustrates this concept. And this is a sample PV system, and you can see it actually starts in December, probably should start in January. But in this particular illustration, you see that this customer is actually using energy. Those are the blue lines. And then as we start to get into the summer period, their PV system starts to overgenerate. And so they're sending that excess generation out into our distribution system. And then again, it goes into November and it starts to, they become a net user again. And so at the end of the year, there's a calculation that determines if there is a net surplus payment or if they want to elect to carry forward or anything of that nature. Now, as an introduction to net energy metering aggregation, this actually came about quite recently. It was in 2012. There are some rules, actually quite a few rules, and we'll hit the high points of those. But the first one is it has to be the same or adjacent parcel. And I think that illustration to the right kind of hits upon that. You can see the star in parcel A is the generating facility. The small circles are meters, and these represent different parcels. And the legislation requires, it says same or adjacent parcel. It really should say adjacent or contiguous parcels. So all of these, if they are owned by the same person or individual, would be eligible for aggregation, and including any parcel that was, for example, across the street would also be eligible for incorporation. I will point out that an example where a parcel A and say parcel F is proposed for aggregation would not be eligible if B and C, for example, were owned by somebody else. The governing body, the legislation states that the governing body must act within 6 months. We did receive an application in November, and that's why we're bringing this forward today. We have to act, or City Council has to act by the middle of May to meet that 6-month deadline. And legislation requires determination of no cost shift, and there's quite a bit of information in your report on that as well. In terms of limitations, some of these limitations are in the normal or in normal net energy metering, including the 1 megawatt limitation. Aggregation does count towards the cap, and aggregated accounts must be the same customer. I already talked about that in the previous illustration. The PV system will be permanently ineligible to receive compensation for any surplus generation. So what that means is if for some reason down the road they decide they do not want to aggregate anymore and go under a different rate schedule, they would be ineligible if they were, and it most likely will be the case, they were in a surplus generation situation. We are going to be bringing forward some rule and regulation changes in the near future. We don't have those ready at this point, but we did want to highlight those because they'll be coming down the road. We do have the ability under the legislation to charge to process bills. That's a little bit different than the way we've been doing it up until now. We have the ability to also charge for additional metering costs, so over and above what we normally would have incurred under normal net energy metering. At this point, it's a little bit uncertain if we can charge for system impacts from an oversized generators. We did have some discussions about that, but I think that's something that's going to have to get decided a little bit down the road, and it may not be an issue at the end of the day. We're not anticipating a lot of these customers at this point. And if there's an incremental cost shift over and beyond what we're anticipating at this point, we can revisit the decision later on, so we have that option. And finally, the aggregators do remain subject to future rate changes to their customer class. So for example, if you have a residential customer that decides to aggregate for some reason, and we change the structure of the residential rate structure, which was in your attachment, you could see the kind of the outline of the different structures, then they would be subject to that as well. So they would pay a new fixed charge if that did come around. Now, we had an opportunity to have some discussions with other folks about what they're doing, since this is kind of uncharted territory for everybody. The CPUC did approve net energy metering aggregation. I will say that the IOUs actually proposed, they filed advice letters and proposed not approving it, but the CPUC went in the other direction. At this point, the IOUs have submitted their billing tariffs, including special charges related to mostly billing that they will impose on these aggregators. In terms of publicly owned utilities, one publicly owned utility has rejected it. One is, it says here, considering rejecting it, but we actually spoke to them several days ago, and it looks like they're definitely going in that direction. And they are going to offer a pilot with some similar features. And then there's several others who are in the very early stages of dealing with applications. So the recommendation tonight, we recommend that the USC recommends City Council adopt a resolution to resolve that allowing aggregation compared to the current NEM program it will not result in an increased cost shift as the cap is maintained. There are no additional charges that are bypassed. There is no incremental rate impact on non-participating customers. Billing and other special charges will be assessed. And again, we can reconsider this decision tonight at a later date if there's some new information on the cost shift issue. Now, in terms of next step, as I mentioned, we're on a bit of a timeline here, and so our plan is to go to City Council in May with this item. There will be rates and rules development in the May-July timeframe, and this will include development of aggregation rate schedules. We're going to have to add something to the rules and regulations as well. And finally, we'll probably have to revisit the net surplus compensation item as well. And finally, I want to emphasize that the plan right now is to bring an electric cost of service in late 2014, which will do a much deeper dive into the current electric rate structure, and I think there's going to be a good opportunity there to have a discussion on the cost shift issue and other issues of that nature that are related to the electric cost of service. And with that, that closes my presentation, and we can open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. We have, no, this is for the next item.
Well, that's the next item.
Yeah, we have a public speaker for the next item. So that's right. So does anyone have any comments? Commissioner Avash.
Can you elaborate a bit on the recommendation? I'm having a little bit of trouble simply understanding the wording. I take it that the recommendation is to allow aggregation subject to certain restrictions.
That's correct. So the legislation has a lot of this information in there and has a lot of requirements that we have to make these determinations. And so we kind of had to put the structure it that way, I guess, in the recommendation and in the resolution. But essentially, as it boils down, yes, we are proposing to approve aggregation, but we felt it was important to really emphasize that there's these limitations. We do intend to charge for certain things, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the approach.
And again, to be clear, the legal requirement is that we respond within 6 months, but not that we approve within 6 months. We have the legal right to reject.
Jessica Mullen, City Attorney's Office, you do. The legal requirement is actually within 6 months, you have to make a determination one way or the other about whether this cost shifting is happening or not.
Thank you. So the recommendation that we're being asked to comment on tonight is to go ahead and allow it subject to these other determinations.
Correct.
The other thing I was hoping you could comment on is what you see as the benefits and impact of this to renewable energy and distributed generation in Palo Alto. It again strikes me that this is fairly simple. We have at least one customer, potentially others in the future, who want to do this. And so assuming that it doesn't create other problems or cost burdens, as you've discussed and as you're stipulating in the recommendation, it's a good thing to do because it presumably pleases at least some of our customers and makes solar energy and distributed generation more attractive in Palo Alto. Is it in fact that simple?
I mean, at this point, we have one application. We're not anticipating an influx of applications. Certainly, I think a lot of the conditions and restrictions might be, folks may be a little bit uncomfortable with committing to that. But having said that, and with the one application, there are certain efficiencies with NEM aggregation, which were cited in the CPUC decision. Certainly, you've got schools come to mind. You may have multiple meters, multiple buildings on a specific parcel, and so this may be actually beneficial for them. So there's that aspect. And then, you've got some folks who want to participate and maybe their building is a historic building or it's not in the right position or something like that. And so, I mean, there really are a lot of kind of restrictions on this, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of demand for it, but, we could be surprised. I don't know.
But you agree that the basic benefit here is serving at least some of our customers in a way that helps encourage distributed generation of PV?
I would agree with that.
Presumably the restriction that some potential participants will find the most onerous is being permanently ineligible to receive compensation for surplus generation. Permanent's a long time, huh?
Yeah, that one's a little, that one has a couple of different kind of angles to it. I mean, if there's a decision in the future by City Council to reverse then, you know, it becomes very complicated in terms of those existing customers. How do you deal with that? How do you have grandfathering conversations at that point and things of that nature? So, but, you know, and then also on a customer level, if the customer decides for, I don't know, whatever reason, maybe they subdivide their parcel and all of a sudden they're in a situation where they've got an oversized generator and they're giving us the energy, you know, that's something that, I mean, they really need to think about it before they commit to this decision.
Can you comment if, when you think about this, does it have anything to do with community solar? Is it, in some respects, analogous or competitive, or is it just completely unrelated in your mind?
I personally, I think it's somewhat unrelated. I do acknowledge that I guess there's been a conversation going on in parallel with this item, and it's purely coincidence, just because we have an application that it's kind of, we're moving forward on this. But I don't know, Jane, you've been more involved in the community solar discussion, if you have any thoughts on that related to aggregation.
But do you see that there's, at least superficially, a community solar aspect to this? We have a generator that's serving more than just the parcel on which the generator sits.
Yeah. Well, in that respect that you just said, Jane Ratchie, Assistant Director of Utilities, I hadn't thought of it that way, but my answer before I heard you ask it that way was generally with community solar, the energy is being sold to the utility and maybe split up, or the value of it split up to the customers who are participating in a community solar, rather than this, which is net energy metered. And so it's used by the customer itself on site, on the contiguous adjacent sites. So to me, that's a big difference. So that's what I'm not sure how to answer the other one where, anyway, that's my answer.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And I guess I also wondered if this in any way competes with, say, the model of a company like Solar City. But I guess there the answer is clearly there's no connection whatsoever, because here you have to be the owner of the parcel. This isn't something that third parties would go off and do.
You know, I don't understand. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about the question? I'm trying to.
If we go to your slide 5, we're imagining a scenario where where it's the owner of these parcels who's doing this, right? It's not a third party who's doing this.
Yes, pretty.
So you're talking about the Solar City would install the panels and then sell the power essentially to the on-site?
My question is really intended to be a follow-up of what Jane Ratchie just said. I'm still trying to understand the implications of what we're doing here. And so my latest question was to wonder, I guess it's a follow-up of the community solar question. And I think I answered my own question. In this model of aggregation, all of these parcels are owned by one and the same person, are they not?
That's correct.
Let me try and answer. I mean, like a normal, just one single owner, one meter, one thing that's not aggregation, but it's going to be net energy metered. The Solar City model, as you say, that's the model, right? They're building this thing. It's going to be net energy metered. The energy used is on site. This is really the same model, but over, more than one site. And so it can be that same Solar City model in my mind.
Could I just note that the simple way to look at this is it's two adjacent lots with solar panels on one that can serve the other lot, and the lots are owned by the same owner. I mean, it's sort of a simple model.
If I could just read from the report. Let me start back here a little bit. An eligible customer with multiple meters may elect to aggregate the electrical load of the meters located on the property where the PV system is located and on all properties adjacent or contiguous to the property on which the PV system is located if those properties are solely owned, leased, or rented by the eligible customer. So there's different kind of permutations of how it could work out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Eglash. Commissioner Melton.
Is the current applicant a commercial or a residential customer?
They're a commercial customer.
Okay. Is the regulation equally applicable to commercial and residential customers?
I mean, the opportunity for
The
aggregation?
opportunity to aggregate.
That's correct. It's available to all customer classes.
You noted in your presentation that one POU has rejected an application and another is considering rejecting it. What was the basis of their thinking in those two cases?
The primary basis is that there is a cost shift, and that this would, in one case, it would quicken reaching the cap, for example, which it would quicken the cost shift. I mean, there was a variety of different kind of permutations of that, but I think there's a general recognition in the POU community that, and also in the IOU community, that there is a cost shift issue associated with net energy metering, and that this would make that problem worse.
So the difference between their situations, their determination, and what you're recommending here is, in their case, it drove them over their cap, and in our case, it does not drive them?
No, it's within their cap, and our approach is similar to what the CPUC adopted, essentially saying that this will occur within the cap anyway. There's arguments to be made that it could quicken the approach to the cap. There's no argument being made that it'll allow you to go over the cap. So, and essentially, we're similar to the CPUC approach, saying that, this is going to happen anyway. We're already projecting reaching that cap, I think, 2016 or 2017. Jane, does that sound about right? 2017. So if we have a bunch of aggregation applications, we could reach that in 2016. And then at this point, we would not offer any more net energy metering at all.
Excuse me, but there is a 1 megawatt limitation, and 1 megawatt's a fairly small contribution towards the 5% cap, isn't it?
I believe our cap is about 9 megawatts in total, 9.5 megawatts. So, right.
So it's a bit more than 10% of the way there. And can you tell us what the size of the current request is, or is that?
I can't remember offhand. I will say that I looked at this particular customer it's actually one parcel with 3 to 4 buildings on site, so it's not separate parcels. And I believe there's 3 to 4 meters, and so they want to loop in one building that's in a historic building, and so the load is very small. You're not talking about a big jump here. So.
Okay. Other commissioners' questions or comments? Commissioner Hall.
Yeah, thanks for your report. So just on this idea of cost shifting, if one accepts the premise, and I think it's reasonable, that an aggregate NEM is going to be just simply replacing NEM that was going to happen anyway. In other words, we're going to meet the 5% cap within a defined time frame, so this would just simply be a displacement of non-aggregated NEM. So that's a reasonable proposition. But outside of that, and I'm not asking you to speculate, but perhaps within discussions that have happened at CPUC or internally here, since we indicated that if some cost shifting is later deemed to be potentially going to occur, we can always revise the policy. So the council could revoke its future decisions. But if there's anything that's been discussed around the PUC or in your own minds, what cases could happen where you could have a cost shifting other than the premise that I just accepted?
Well, the one that comes to mind, and we did talk to one of the other publicly owned utilities where they're really concerned about this, is actually oversized generators on a specific facility, and then a grouping of those, and then you start to have impacts on your distribution system. You have voltage issues. And so under that circumstance, and if there's a future legal determination that we can't charge particular customers for any distribution upgrades, at that point we may come back and say this is a cost shift that we can't recover that cost, and so that may be a driver for us to revisit this earlier decision. Again, at this point we have no reason to believe we are going to have those kind of impacts, and we only have one customer, and so we're not really delving deeply into that legal issue. But certainly if our engineers look at it in more detail and that's a problem, we can do that.
Okay. And are there any other examples that have come to mind, discussed?
I can't think of.
Okay.
any.
Well, then I'm not asking you to speculate. That's fine. Thank you.
One quick follow-up. Hasn't there been news recently about discussion of whether to increase the net metering cap? Do you want to comment on that?
I can't recall anything offhand. I mean, I will say if, history is any representation of what will happen in the future, I mean, they have been gradually increasing the cap over the last 10 years. And so, that may happen in the future. We don't know.
Okay, no more comments, it looks like. So does anyone have a motion on this?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or other motions? No? Okay.
Can I just double check? Who moved and who seconded it? I moved. Foster moved and Eglis seconded.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. We have a 5-0. Thank you very much for the presentation. Okay, let's go on to item number 3. After the staff presentation, I have one speaker card. A member of the public, you can come and speak after the presentation. Thanks very much.
We have Senior Resource Planner and basically Rates Manager John Aubenschein here to give an overview.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Aubenschein, Senior Resource Planner. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the financial plans and then just let you get right into questions. We're giving you a lot of material, and I think a lot of it speaks for itself. What we're recommending tonight is to have you recommend to the City Council that they adopt the financial plans for the electric, gas, wastewater collection, and water utilities. The financial plans each contain reserves management practices. These are essentially the reserves management practices that you reviewed at your last 2 meetings. And just to refresh your memory on those, the reserve structure changes that we're proposing for all utilities are to add an operations CIP, add operations CIP and unassigned reserves to each utility, essentially splitting the different purposes of the rate stabilization reserves into multiple reserves. Using the operations reserve as a contingency reserve rather than the rate stabilization reserve, as merging the emergency plant replacement reserves into the operations reserves, and then for the gas and electric utilities, for the electric utility adding a hydro stabilization reserve, and for the gas utility merging the supply and distribution reserves. We had some changes from the preliminary forecast, and I think you've received an email from that on us with an at places item that we gave to the Finance Committee back in at their meeting earlier this month. The gas, we've changed the forecast for the gas utility, and that had to do with an adjustment to our projections for the cross-bore program. Just to be clear, it was not a change to the projected costs for the program, but more that we found that we'd had it in two places in the forecast, and so we needed to reduce that, and that pushed the rate increases out into the future. The big change is for the water and wastewater collection utilities. And after the February meeting where we presented our preliminary forecast to you, we started to see a lot more uncertainty in our CIP forecasts. And the uncertainty was coming from a few different sources. First, in the beginning of this year, we started to see some increases in the costs for some of our projects that are currently underway. And that included one of our water main replacement projects. The bids for that project have come in a lot higher than we expected. Actually, 2 water main replacement projects, if you include the California Avenue project. We also have some uncertainty around the future costs for our water main replacement program. We're coming to the end of the 25-year program that we started back in 1993, and there's a little bit of uncertainty about the best rate of main replacement. And we've also been seeing some increasing costs for main replacement, and that's coming from a variety of sources. Some of it is due to the improved economy. Bids are coming in higher, but we're also changing the materials that we're using for our pipe replacement to HDPE, which is going to have it's going to have a lower life cycle cost, but it has a higher upfront cost. And then we're also using larger diameter pipe because of fire code regulations. And sort of the accumulation of all these things seems to be leading to increased water main replacement costs. So one of the things that we're going to do is, before we undertake our next water main replacement program, we're going to move up a study that we were going to do in 2016. We're going to try and get that done this year, hopefully by the end of this year, possibly early next year, to examine some of our assumptions and also take a look at the costs. And this is the third source of uncertainty for a major transmission line. That we're going to do a seismic evaluation of. If it had just been, I'd say, if it had just been one source of uncertainty, or maybe even two, I think we may have been able to proceed with a 0% rate increase. But with all of the uncertainties that have started to add up over the last month or so, our feeling is that it would be prudent to do a 4% rate increase this year. And that'll put us in a better position if some of the higher end CIP scenarios come to pass when we're done with the study. And we're proposing to do those rate increases in November, and that's to give us time to take into account any drought rates that we might have to put into effect. So this, I'm sorry. There's also, we're also proposing a 4% for the wastewater utility, and part of that has to do, and that has to do with the fact this is, like we said earlier, our said at our preliminary, or said at the February meeting, this is our smallest utility, and we were comfortable moving ahead with no rate increase. Given that we were expecting 6s and 7s out in the future, we still felt that was fine. But it makes a lot of, given that we're going to do the rate increase for the water utility, it makes a lot of sense to coordinate the rate increase, the rates for the water utility and the wastewater utility, because they have very similar noticing requirements, Prop 218 noticing. And this will give us a chance to spread those rate increases out over 5 years rather than 4. So this is what we're proposing. The estimated impact on the median bill is 2% in FY 2015, and then 3 to 4% out in future years. We wanted to just include some scenarios that we provided to the Finance Committee at their March meeting. This is what are a couple of different scenarios that we could see for our water utility if we did a 0% rate increase. So the base case includes a higher CIP projection than we provided you back in February. But we're also looking at, we looked at the high end of some of the uncertainties, and I would say they could go even higher than this at this point. And we were looking at 6 to 7% rate increases in future years. Under the base case, under the high scenario, it could rise to 8% rate increases. Having a 4% this year puts us in a better position to deal with that. It keeps us down at 5 to 7% in the high scenario. And then this shows the two different scenarios for the wastewater collection utility. We're recommending the 4%, which is 4 to 5% rate increases over the course of the next few years. If we stuck with a 0%, then we would be looking at 7% rate increases in future years. So after your review tonight, we're going to take this to the Finance Committee on April 15th, and then we're hoping to go to the City Council in June along with and have these financial plans adopted by resolution along with the FY 2015 budget. In the summer, we would develop our water and sewer rate increase proposals, and in November 1st, we would aim to get all the Prop 218 noticing and have those take effect November 1st. And that's my presentation.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Questions, Commissioner Foster?
How many years in a row have we had water rate?
Sorry. Hey, I have to take it back. I forgot.
Public input.
Ma'am, would you come up? Your chance is first. And then Commissioner Foster.
Thank you very much for the answer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Helen McKenzie. I am a resident utility ratepayer and a voter in Palo Alto. I am also the president of the Garden Club of Palo Alto, who has submitted a letter to the City Council staff and this commission on September 30th, 2013, calling for a revision of the water rate structure for the residents of Palo Alto who pay a disproportionate share of the annual water bill. We are joined in that letter by other member-driven organizations that collectively represent approximately 2,000 of the 16,000 residents who are rate-paying customers. So 4 points I'd like to make. One is we believe that residents are paying an unfair share of the costs. There are approximately 60,000 residents in the city of Palo Alto, 16,000 homes, and we're paying, as I said, 54% of the total water bill. And on a tiered basis, which to us means that that's an unfair penalty that's assigned for anything that we use above what is considered a bare minimum amount. Meanwhile, businesses are charged on a uniform rate with neither an incentive nor a disincentive, depending upon the program, to conserve their water usage. According to the city's economic development officer in a meeting yesterday, the annual daily population swells to between 125,000 and 140,000 people in our fair city on a daily basis. And they're not all coming to our residence. They're going to downtown businesses either to work or they are visitors. And yet there is no incentive or disincentive to conserve water from this doubling of our population on a daily basis. We think this is patently unfair. Second, we object to the rate increase. We respectfully object to the rate increase. Despite the very detailed attention given to this in the presentation, we believe that there's a lot of words like uncertainty, speculation, some more uncertainty, a little bit more uncertainty, and maybe a tiny bit of a old-fashioned rounding up. Additionally, the staff report attributes a part of this cost increase to sprinkler systems in non-residential buildings and fire hydrants used on construction sites, which appears to undermine the cost of service system sizing analysis. Wow, what a phrase. That was done a few years ago. So a 4% across the board increase appears to be unfair. So not only do we object to paying an unfair share of the water rates, but we would like you to address, which we would like you to address, but also a 4% across the board increase in the water rate. Number 3, we really want to acknowledge the professionalism and calm demeanor of staff in every conversation that we've had, all of our written and verbal communications, and this has gone on since our first meeting, which was before we sent the letter, and they knew where we stood at that point in time. We know that they disagreed with the conclusion, and we appreciate the professionalism and the demeanor at all times. And last, we would like to congratulate the City of Palo Alto Utilities for receiving one of the Silicon Valley Water Conservation Awards today for a comprehensive water conservation program which saved almost 300 gallons of water, of which we are sure that the residents contributed largely to that number. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comment. Thanks for attending. Okay, now on to Commissioner Foster.
How many years in a row have we had a water rate increase?
I'm sorry, I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head, but the last time that we went without a water rate increase would have been several years ago.
That was my thinking.
Yeah.
It feels like it's been a long time. Yeah. And so I have to say that personally I was delighted at our last meeting, or whenever it was, when we thought we could kind of survive a year without a water rate increase, and in fact, no increases in anything. And so I actually agree with the comment that was just made. Given the uncertainty in general, I'd go for being prudent, and if we're uncertain and so on and so forth, build in the rate increase to be safe. In this particular case, my inclination actually is to go the other way and not do the increase, hope for the best. If it does not turn out that way, then understanding that means a potentially larger increase next year. And so I would go for no increases is my initial position, but be interested to hear what my colleagues have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Foster. Commissioner Melton.
So there's a fair amount of uncertainty in the water situation, which we're going to try to resolve in the next few months. And you're proposing to increase the wastewater rate just because we're increasing the water rate and it's easy to tie them together?
We generally try to coordinate rate changes between the two utilities. We're looking at 7% rate increases in future years, and this is about the same as we're seeing at your preliminary meeting as well. It's with all of the noticing and it's actually very costly to do all of the Prop 218 noticing, and for a very small utility like that, it doesn't necessarily make sense to do it by itself unless there's a really distinct need to do it. But given that we're recommending the 4% rate increase for water, it does make sense to piggyback on the administrative work that goes into the Prop 218.
So wastewater is subject to the notice provisions?
Yes, it is.
Also? Okay. It seems to me that the 4% number that you're putting out there now is no better a number than the 0% that you. I mean, I think it's an unknown at this point, and I'm wondering why we aren't deferring this decision until we have more data. Why we don't, since we're not going to have, you're not proposing this be a July 1 increase, which would be normal. Instead of putting in a number, why don't you put in TBD until we have enough information to put forward a firmer number, I guess it seems to me like this is just another guess and is likely to change in 3 months.
So we've actually done a fair amount of analysis on the CIP. I'm not ready to put out firm numbers, and I would say the downside uncertainty, optimistic uncertainty is a lot smaller than the pessimistic uncertainty on my side and on our side, which is why we recommended the 4%. With regard to your, so I wouldn't characterize it as a guess necessarily. But, with regard to your question about why we don't just wait until we know more, it's going to, there is a very long lead time in getting rates changed. There's a 45-day noticing period, discussions with both the UAC and the Finance Committee and the Council. And if we want to have a November rate increase, we need to be talking about it now. I think that pretty much summarizes it.
Okay, so another aspect of this is I presume we're still waiting till April 15th for final SFPUC numbers, and that could change it again?
I think your question is going to the drought rates, to the possibility of drought rates. And I think one important thing to remember about drought rates is that while the rates increase, we don't see a revenue increase from drought rates. So what we're talking about here with the 4% is we want a 4% rate increase to raise revenue. If in April we hear that we needed to do a large enough cut that we'd adopt drought rates, while the rates would go up quite a bit, we wouldn't expect that our revenue would go up because we'd be spreading our revenue over a smaller number of units of sales. Does that make sense?
Okay, Commissioner Hall.
Can I just add just very quickly, and I don't know if this is a relevant point, but the question of why we would do a 4% rate increase later this year, after the water season, by the way, so the bill impact is even less. And in lieu of just proposing nothing, we do look, as you know, on a going forward basis, the full bill impact. And so one of the things we do try to manage is the total bill impact also on a going forward basis. This does help with that. If you look at the, what here is on slide 4 and the projections over the next few years, allowing an earlier rate increase, which is, by the way, not during the summer irrigation months. It has a nominal bill impact for this fiscal year, but also helps mitigate other bill impacts going forward when we have to raise rates in the other utilities.
Okay, Commissioner Hall.
Thanks for your presentation. I would like to just circle to the wastewater projections and then come back to the water. On your slide 7, you're showing projections up through 2019 for wastewater rates. And I'm looking at they're all going up year after year, which is the general trend, but I'm looking at particularly at the treatment part, and I'm eyeballing the increases from currently 2014 until 2019, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and I'm eyeballing that there's approximately a 50% increase in treatment costs over those 6 years. Now, you probably don't have the exact numbers, but I'm just eyeballing from the chart. And I'm wondering why it is so big. I'm looking at
sure. I can actually
the blue bars.
Yeah, and I can't speak to whether it's exactly 50%. I think what I've put in the financial plan is that it's about 5% a year it's going up. And so 5% raised to the fifth. I mean, I can't do that off the top of my head, but the wastewater treatment costs are going up, and they're going to continue to go up probably by 5%, probably for the next. I have the exact number in the plan, but well over 10 years. And this has to do with a lot of major upgrades that are happening at the treatment plant. They're upgrading, or they will upgrade the biosolids processing facility. They're going to replace the incinerator and replace it with a digester or whatever comes out of the study. They're upgrading they're replacing their laboratory facilities, upgrades to the rehabilitation of the 72-inch wastewater pipeline that goes into the plant, and a couple of other projects. And all of that is going to be a huge capital expenditure. A lot of it will be debt financed, but it's our treatment rates, as well as all of the other partners' treatment rates, will continue to go up.
And my understanding is that that's a pass-through cost to the utility.
It is.
So from the utility's point of view, you have little or no control over that. You simply accept the forecast as provided and run it through into your calculations, right?
Well, that's true. Yeah, okay. And we do coordinate with the. We're in the same organization. We are one of several partners, but also in the same organization as the treatment plant. Okay. So we keep tabs on that, and just like any other partner, we talk to the staff of the treatment plants. So.
Okay, so there's something unsatisfying for me, and I'm not saying that the utility is necessarily the responsible agency for making me happy on this, but it seems to me that we're being asked to bless rates that are driven by something that is a black box in terms. You did help a little bit with your explanation, but we don't have anybody here representing a very major chunk of the increase. And I'm eyeballing again, but I think other than the CIP, that's the biggest growth part of the wastewater market. And so it seems to me it's very difficult for the UAC to really, in good faith, approve rates where we have not enough information coming through about all of the elements you talked about, and an opportunity to talk about that and perhaps drill in and understand and maybe push back on it.
We can provide some more information, and I would recommend that you read page 11 of the wastewater collection financial plan, and let's see. There's also a long-term outlook section on page 16 of the wastewater collection utility financial plan. And there's also information available in the city's budget, because the wastewater treatment facility is part of the city's budget, where you'll see a lot of these, especially in the CIP plan, you'll see a lot of these costs summarized. The one thing that you might consider this analogous to, however, is in all of our other utilities, there are also commodity pass-through costs in our water utility, in our gas utility, in our electric utility.
Understand. Those are a little bit more transparent to me than this.
Okay. So we can provide more information.
So let me get to water. You didn't sell me on the 4%, mainly because I think we already know we're in a high cost bracket. We're amongst the highest rates amongst urban cities in cities in the Bay Area, and certainly in California. We've appreciated the bench for water, not for wastewater, for water. And so the benchmarking work that we began, and I think it was really a good piece of work. I understand that will continue, but I think we've got a very big burden of demonstrating to our ratepayers that we are understanding and be able to demonstrate that we have understood and can explain why we're higher. We're not there yet. I think we've made progress, but we're not there yet. I also think that the examples that you gave, I think I have no doubt that if you had more time to develop them and present the reasons why they're different from what they were a few months ago, that we might be brought along to the point where we'd be persuaded that is valid enough for 4%, but I'm not there yet. It's just not enough information. So okay. I would not support a 4% increase.
Thanks, Commissioner Hall. Commissioner Eglach.
I also want to comment on the proposed water rate increase. First of all, thanks for a terrific study and presentation. I understand and sympathize with why you're recommending 4%. I think it was a reasonable thing for you and staff to recommend. But I think we have a real problem here if we go ahead with it. And I've listened thoughtfully to my colleagues' comments, and I guess I want to take a moment to explain what for me is the real problem here. When we propose a rate increase because our current costs are going up, or because we have some unrecovered costs from the prior year, then there's no problem selling that to the ratepayers. That's the clearest case. And I think such rate increases have always been approved and supported. I think in the second category, when we're proposing a rate increase because of known future cost increases, I think those are things that we maybe sometimes support, because there you have the option of saying, well, it's in the future. Let's increase the rate in the future so rates represent actual current costs at that time. But here we're in a third, even weaker case. We're talking about increasing rates for possible future cost increases. And although the arguments that you provided were rational and well-founded and thoughtful, and I have no doubt that one or more of those possible contributions to increased costs are likely to come about, none of them are definite or known with certainty yet. And I think we have a real serious problem if we start approving rate increases for future possible costs. I think that's just not a good thing for us to do. I see the virtue of how that allows rate increases to be smoothed out. I see the benefit that means that future rate increases won't need to be as large as they otherwise would. I just don't think those arguments are powerful enough to basically charge next year's ratepayers with increased costs that aren't happening next year. For me, that set of arguments is sufficient to want to go with zero rate increase. But even beyond that, I think we have a real problem with optics, with the appearance to the city. I can almost imagine the headline in the local newspaper that will say something about how the city wants to bring in money that it doesn't need, and that somehow will relieve the burden on us to control costs carefully, because if we've got the money, then we can spend it. Of course, no one in City of Palo Alto Utilities thinks that way. But I do worry about the appearance of bringing in money when we don't yet know what we're going to need it for. So for all those reasons, I think we are much better off with 0% water.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll just briefly say that I also think that the report was excellent, and I appreciate the presentation. And I also think that we often talk about concerns about rate increases, but we also talk in tandem about making sure that we smooth increases that are happening or are going to happen. So, I do appreciate. I think you've been thinking about that when you're looking at this. So, I think that I think we are in a. If it's this third category, Commissioner Eglis just talked about it. We're not clearly not comfortable with the idea of raising the rates sort of preemptively in this case. But I'll stop there and see if we have a motion. Go ahead.
Quick additional comment. I want to commend what you've done, which is, of course, outstanding. You've looked to the future, and you've used your professionalism and judgment to see what's coming down the pike. And you've raised the alarm and shared the information. And so I don't think any of our comments should feel to you like a criticism. In fact, I think we're all hugely impressed with what you've done and the manner in which you've done it. I think what we're all saying is despite all that, and despite thinking that smoother rate increases are better than postponing a huge one, in this case, we're reluctant to take that final step.
May I just add to that? As a water utility professional myself, I would be really dismayed if you weren't thinking forward like you are. I just endorse what Commissioner Eglash said. You're doing the right thing. I just think that the burden of explanation here, because we're so high priced, is very high, and we just don't get there in terms of the explanation we have yet.
So since John Aubenshine here is actually basically pitching the case for our engineering folks, because they're the ones who are seeing the bids come in, and they're the ones who are the ones raising the alarm that these prices are double what they had originally estimated. I'll just be quite honest with you. It's unfortunate that I didn't insist that Tom Marshall be here to explain that to you directly. So, you know, in many respects, I do apologize to John for that. But we certainly take your comments to heart. And we may be back in the summer anyway with a proposal to increase rates based on new information that we will have at that point.
So under the circumstances, I see two possibilities. We could have there's sort of an obvious motion, which is a motion to approve the staff recommendation in all respects, except with respect to the 4% increases for the two utilities. That's one possibility. I could also envision a situation where the staff could, in theory, change its proposed recommendation, and then we would simply endorse the recommendation. So I'll go with the first, unless you'd like to make an on-the-spot decision to take a different approach. In other words, you sort of have to make a decision as to whether you want to go to the City Council with a different recommendation on this one.
As a matter of procedure, I think the staff recommendation, the staff request to the UAC is what it is. It's sitting here, it's in the agenda.
Okay.
That's a fait accompli. So I think we do the first thing you said. Now, staff may indeed choose to change their recommendation when they go to finance or not. And I believe the way this works is staff can take either position to finance. But I think our position tonight is clear. They don't change their mind. We rule on what they presented us with.
However,
or do we make a recommendation to the City Council? Because another way to say it is the UAC recommends to the City Council no rate increases in any utility this year.
I think that's right. I think that's tantamount to the first thing you said. I think it's the same.
Although there's the reserve management policies and so on and so forth. So I'm just trying to kind of figure out how to capture it all. But I'm open to discussion.
Unless I'm missing something, I think the first thing you said is the right thing to do.
So maybe you could break this up by utility. So each of attachments A through D address a utility.
So
the financial plans for each.
Right. So unless I'm missing some subtlety here, in which case I'm happy to listen to my fellow commissioners. My motion would, if we needed a motion, my motion would be to approve as requested by staff, by utilities, except 0 increases in the rates of the 4 utilities.
That is what I first said. I'm good with it. If you said
that, and that way we collect their other recommendations unchanged.
So I'll change your language slightly to recommend approval. You all don't really approve, but you could certainly recommend the council.
Recommend approval. We don't get to approve, we recommend approval.
Correct. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so is that a theoretical
That's a motion if I can.
I'll second it.
Okay. Comments?
Discussion. Okay, I want to take the next step. We can, it's fine that we say we don't agree with the proposed 4% increase. But we can't just drop it there. What is it going to take? What do we need to get to the bottom of this? I mean, there has to be an end game on this thing, because whether 4% is the right, my suspicion is 0 is not the right number, and I'm not convinced yet that 4 is the right number, And I want to keep working on this until we have a something that we can take to the city or take to the ratepayers and say, okay, we've scrubbed the hell out of this, and we are convinced that 3.7 is the right number or whatever. But we've got to get it. We've got to have something between us and staff that says, where do we go from here? Now, one answer is they can tell us, well, we're going to go to the council with 4, and only if they don't approve that do we have to do any more. I don't know. So I guess I'm looking at Val for some feedback on what do you think the next step is? Are you just going to go ahead and go forward with the 4%? Are you going to, do you think we ought to do some more work on it and try to get more data? I personally would like to talk to Tom Marshall before so what do you think the next step is?
So I think what I should do is go back and, as staff, will think through the options. I don't think any one of us is prepared to simply throw out the analysis that was done here and say, oh sure, we'll tumble to whatever you recommend. I think we need to think about it. At the end of the day, we may be in complete alignment with what this commission might recommend. Alternatively, if we're not, and if we do really think there needs to be some sort of rate increase, mid-year rate increase, it might make sense to work with a couple of commissioners offline just to make sure we actually are addressing the concerns that are raised, because clearly there's some level of discomfort here and some feeling that we haven't addressed the issues because we didn't actually loop back after doing our first water benchmarking update. And so that could be the other alternative. But I won't tell you what we're going to recommend here tonight. I don't know. We're going to have to sit back and think about it.
So to be clear, I am.
Just one moment, please. So John reminded me that our engineering staff is looking at further studies into the capital improvement program that we've got, particularly for the water utility. And based on what the results of that study, I mean, obviously, if we really determine that the best thing to do for the utility is to go ahead with a rate increase, we'll be back regardless, because to move forward on that, there have to be hearings. I mean, to do any sort of rate change on the Prop 218 utilities, we have to go through the process to make those rate changes. So eventually we will be back with more information, as you're noting. We will be back with more information. I'm not sure exactly when it is right now. So you asked for more information on the water utility. You want to talk to Tom Marshall. We don't have the information beyond a particular CIP that was recently let that came in a lot higher than we thought it would. But they're actually going to do a study to determine what CIPs we need to do going forward and what the timing of those will be. And that will be very useful information that will inform this whole discussion.
Indeed, it will be. And what do you think the timetable for that is?
They're going out with the RFP right now to have the studies. Depends on what the bids are.
So you're talking months, not weeks.
I am not talking weeks. That is correct. It will be more than a matter of weeks. We are talking months.
That's well, that really means that that information will not be available in this rate-making cycle.
What are you defining as this rate-making cycle? Because you can do rate increases mid-year, right? I'm not sure what that means.
Well, even if you're thinking because of the Prop 218 requirements that these rates would come into effect in November, you still got to get the notices out by June or July or something like that. And so I guess my question really is does it make sense to defer the water, go back to my original thought, put in TBD for water and wastewater until we get this additional study and information and get our CIP plans down when we really know what we're going to be doing, and still make a November or December type timetable for rate increases. And it sounds to me like you're saying no.
Perhaps I can offer a different way of looking at this that might help us get over this. It was not my intent to suggest zero pending further information. I neither want nor expect further information. My recommendation is that the rate increase is zero for 2015, period, until and unless there's some reason to consider it differently. My expectation is that we're going to go into 2015 at 0%. And when it's time to discuss the rates for 2016, staff will be 1 year smarter than they are now, and will deal with what the facts are at that time. It is possible that something would happen in the next year where there'd be an additional rate increase, as Commissioner Melton and Director Fong have just been discussing in their exchange. But I would consider that extraordinary and unusual. And sure, there can always be extraordinary events that lead to extraordinary rate increases. But my expectation with this motion is that we're saying, based on what we know tonight, based on what's certain and what's uncertain and what's predicted, the UAC at this point is recommending that that staff go to finance with a rate increase of zero, no rate increase in 2015. And so I would suggest to my fellow commissioner that one way of dealing with the question that we've been struggling with in this exchange for the last several minutes is to say, look, it's zero for now. It's zero until it's not zero. And maybe that's for a year, and maybe something extraordinary happens in the next year, and we just leave that in staff's hands.
Any other comments? Okay. We've had a motion and a second.
So can I repeat the motion? At least this is as I understand it. The Utilities Advisory Commission recommends approval as requested by staff, except to recommend zero increases for all utilities for fiscal year 2015.
Correct. Okay. So all in favor?
I seconded.
Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
We have a 4-1 vote. Thank you.
Oh, I'll repeat that for the record. So we got some Brown Act additional info. Thank you so much, John. Thank you. We got some additional Brown Act information on how we can properly record these votes. So I'm sorry, it might seem, we'll get used to this. We'll be smoother. There was a 4-1 vote, motion moved by Commissioner Eglash, seconded by Vice Chair Foster. 4-1 vote with all present voting yes, except Commissioner Melton voting no.
Thank you. So does that complete that? Yeah.
Yes, I believe
Okay,
so,
great.
because especially since John left.
Yeah, thank you. Although he's still in the background, so no, I just want to make sure that was all you need to say for that bit. Okay. Item number 4 is potential topics for discussion for future UAC meetings. So we've already agreed that we would cover water in the coming months, make sure that we cover that every month. Any other items that commissioners would like to see in future meetings?
I have a question that has to either do with future scheduling or commissioner comments, but I'll try it now. At the last meeting, we had a discussion about this has to do with fiber, about since the council did not appoint a council committee to track fiber, we were going to communicate with the council, basically asking, hey, are you dumping this back on us now? Is it now our responsibility to pick up the fiber stuff, since it's in our charter, and the council is not doing it personally? And so I guess I'm asking the chair and Director Fong if any letter went to the council seeking clarification on that.
Can I just say I did multitask while we were in this meeting, and at about 7:24 p.m. tonight, I did send you a quick update on the city's efforts with regard to Google, and it was in a short email from Jim Keene, and in that I do note that let me see, there was a committee that was selected to look at the fiber and wireless efforts, and the committee comprises Richard Brand, Leona Cook, David Creamer, Robert Harrington, Brad Horek, Andrew Cow, Donald Don Lee, Christine Moe, and Andy Poggio. So there is an advisory committee that has been selected.
Okay, but that's the Citizens Advisory.
I'm sorry, sorry, did I misunderstand the question?
Yeah, so Commissioner Melton's asking, is this, should this be, or is this coming back into the UAC's fold, or is there a continuing effort on the State Council's part to address this issue?
I believe there's a continuing effort on the part of the council to address this issue, as evidenced by the fact that they actually did. There's now an advisory committee that has been established.
Okay, well, we'll have to see, because that's not much progress for six months or whatever it was since the last meeting, but we'll have to see what exactly what the plan is, what the progress, if there's any progress other than appointing this a committee, which is not a city council committee, it's this advisory, committee, and then if there's any other, if there's been any other progress by the committee that was, looking at this, and then when's the next meeting? What's the plan? What's the next meeting?
Yeah, just so you've seen some of the articles that Google has gone forward and selected. I think it's 34 different communities. We're one of them to look at launching their Google fiber services, and we are one of them, and that is certainly something that we are anyway trying to respond to in terms of the Google requests.
Okay.
You do have a joint meeting with the council coming up, and this may be a topic you want to.
Yeah, and also I will. How about this? I don't know if this will satisfy Commissioner Melton, but I'll follow up to see what the progress is, other than this identification of this committee. See what the progress is, see what the plan is, and then come back, and I'll during next month's or the month after that, the next meeting, and the report from the commissioners, I'll give an update.
Thank you.
Any other future topics? Okay. Our next scheduled meeting is, does any commissioner comments? Okay, next scheduled meeting is May 7th, 2014. That's a daytime meeting to go over the budget. It starts at noon or whenever we want. Is
I
there food
think it
served?
normally is 11:30 if
Okay.
you're hungry.
And is that here in this other room? or-
Yeah, we've often done it in the HR conference room.
Yeah, okay, great. And that's open to the public?
The meeting is.
Yeah.
Can, as a matter of fact, can we discuss, just for clarity, because we've had some changes of schedules, I assume the meeting after that, pardon me, is the first Wednesday in June, is that right?
That's a regularly scheduled meeting, yes.
And so at some point, of course, we'll have our usual fun about the July and August meetings. When should we contemplate? When should we kick off that fun?
You mean the discussion as to whether or not we cancel those meetings?
We always discuss it, and sooner or later, we combine them into a single meeting, usually in late July.
You can start that discussion anytime you'd like.
Sounds good.
Let's see how.
Actually, this particular year, my summer vacation is the last 2 weeks of July, but whatever.
Oh, so we can have both of those meetings in the summer?
Both, because everyone loves that early August meeting.
I love it too. Well,
Do you really? Everyone?
oh yeah, good time to meet.
Really? Everyone okay with early August and early July? All right.
I don't know what you just said.
Wow, maybe this year we'll actually stick with the schedule.
So, however, I do recall that when we tried to schedule our annual joint study session with council, and it was suggested for August, and that didn't work out. What I learned during that interchange was that council is taking July off this year. Normally it's been August, but this year they're taking the month of July off. And so... Yeah.
So we could get a lot of things done in July.
That's what I was thinking. We could get a whole stack of things done to send to council in August if we meet in July.
All right, well, let's defer this discussion. We've started the discussion, and we can continue it later.
Because it's a scheduling issue, we'll probably do a lot of this by email, just doodle, find out when you guys are available.
So the meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.